There can be a sense of sadness as we finish observing God's holy days for another year. The last 2 holy days of God's plan of salvation picture a turning point in mankind's history as God steps in to direct man's actions and to show what is possible under the godly leadership of Jesus Christ. The millennial reign of Christ will bring restoration and healing to the physical creation. Under the leadership of Jesus Christ and his saints, humanity will be served with the goal of their adoption into the family of God. But for those whom God has called that live in the northern hemisphere, the winter months can be bleak in terms of reminders of God's way of life, especially as they are contrasted with the pagan holidays of Halloween, Christmas, New Year's, and Easter. The farms and gardens are done producing for another year. The weather turns colder and windier. The daylight portion of the day gets shorter and shorter. Everything winds down until we see life in the natural world return in the spring. From our perspective, the growing and work season is done for the year. However, in ancient Israel, the time around the fall holy days saw the harvesting of figs and grapes, pomegranates, and dates. Fields were prepared for the winter planting, since the ground doesn't freeze solid there like it does here. This included clearing the land from the previous year's crop, doing maintenance on the field like removing stones or weeds or repairing stone walls. The fields were plowed and planted with winter crops such as winter barley. All of this was done to take advantage of the early rains, softening the ground and giving moisture to the plants. Equipment needed to be serviced or repaired before next year's seasons, fixing harnesses for the work animals, sharpening scythes, cleaning or fixing hand tools, and so forth. Harvested crops needed to be taken to market to be put up for storage or preserved for future use. Around October-November, there were olives and figs to harvest. Midwinter brought the citrus harvest and the late range, which helped to soften the ground for the spring plantings. Come March-April, there was a preparation for the barley harvest before Passover. The winter months were certainly not a time of laying around and waiting. There was much work to accomplish, and in this there is a great spiritual parallel in considering what we should be doing over the winter months. Jesus Christ is certainly our example of continual spiritual work. There was never a time when he was not preaching the gospel, healing the sick, teaching at the temple, or serving in some way. At least 11 times in John's gospel account, Jesus is recorded talking about his or his Father's works. Christ came to do, and we are called to follow his examples, we find in John 14:12. The parable of the talents shows us that we are to be growing and developing what God has given to each of us. More than the increase, Christ is looking for the effort and work, as we find in 1 Thessalonians 4:10. We are to grow in love for one another, John 15:17. And as a verb, love requires effort and action, as we find in Hebrews 10:24 and Galatians 5:13. The coming months are not to be a time of simply waiting for the spring, but a time of work, much like the rest of the year. With all the messages given since the Feast of Trumpets, we have received more biblical instruction than 3 months of Sabbaths. These coming months offer the time to review, study, and practice what we have been given. There is still work to be done by serving each other and the congregation. We are still part of an end-time work to live and preach the gospel. We can prepare for the review of God's holy days that will begin next spring. We need to be doing our part as the bride of Christ to be ready for our marriage at his return. I encourage you to make the most of this Sabbath day and each one that follows until we are once again reviewing God's holy days. Let us do the work we need to be doing while there is time to do it. I wish you a profitable and value-filled Sabbath.